did you decide to, are we moving the activity or the ground in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Looks like we are recording. We've got 19, it's like 19 and counting participants right now.
Oh, where do you see that?
In the top right corner.
Oh, participants, 21. Yeah.
And it is recording.
It's recording now.
Yeah. A little red blinking button at the top. So anything we say now is on the record.
Okay.
So what's it like up in Minnesota today? Is it nice again?
Beautiful, yeah. Just run of 70 and sunny.
Yeah.
Sunny and 70 all week.
Yeah.
Quite unusual.
I'll take it.
John, I went for a morning walk down to the creek, and the beavers are starting a brand new dam right behind our house. It's like
Oh, cool! I love that.
We like having them there, but it's like it's always this thing about, well, let's see, which trees are they going to cut down, and it's just a fascinating thing to observe.
I love wandering on your property.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's a beautiful segue into this presentation.
Oh, it is. It is.
Connection to place.
It's like that. That creek and all the life that it fosters. The milk and everything else.
Great. Well.
And the diversity.
Oh yeah. In fact, this year we had fireflies down there for the first time that we're aware of in 20 years. So it's definitely a story of regeneration.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that story. We can probably maybe get started. Looks like
I don't know. Nick, does Nick tell us when we should start, or how do we do this? And are our participants in at this point? Do we know?
I think we can get started. Well, good morning, everyone. As you're kind of joining us, thank you for joining us for this morning's Regenerative School Design Workshop. We've been excited to share this with you, and thank you, Paul, for sharing your own story of regenerative design on your own homeland. It was beautiful. I'm Jen Garman. I'm an architect at Cunningham Group. I'm joined by my colleagues, Paul Hutton, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Cunningham, as well as John Pfluger, who's a design principal within our education studio. We are glad you're here with us today. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that since this is a live session, if you can please mute your microphone during the presentation, that'll help us all out. And also, there is a chat feature, which it looks like there's a lot of fun conversations happening right now. Please continue. That's a wonderful way to connect. The circle next to the chat function with the question mark in it is the Q&A. So if during the presentation you have any questions that you would like us to answer, please post them there and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. We will be doing a couple polls throughout the presentation for engagement, so look for those, as they'll be kind of a limited time that they'll be open. And then we will have a breakout activity at the end. So we ask that everyone turn on your video when you get to that point at the end, so that we can really connect and enjoy each other's company. The objectives for today's workshop is to help you all understand the difference between sustainable design and regenerative design, and how a regenerative approach might help you to see how your schools could have a greater impact on the communities that you serve. both your students, the larger ecology around you, and community. And to understand the role of regenerative design within the sort of visioning process and phasing with our school districts and community. The agenda is pretty simple. We'll describe regenerative design as we've come to understand it, and walk you through the process that we have created with some of our clients and partners, and then engage you in sort of the next generation of this workshop as we have come to explore it. So at this time, we will do our first poll.
Just because we can.
And we should. We would like to know who's in the room with us. We can't see you. So we would love for you to just take a moment, identify kind of your role, whichever most closely aligns with you, and tell us where you live, city, state, country. And hopefully you're seeing this kind of live results as it shows up.
Looks like an architect-centric group.
It's great. And I'm not sure. One engineer. That's fantastic. Looks like most people have responded. If you are able to fill in question number 2, I'm not seeing the results yet, but we'll give a couple more seconds to answer those.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's going to show us the results, Jen. Of course, we're all still learning this new format, everybody, so bear with us as we try to figure these out. We've all gotten pretty good at Zoom, but interesting how many different platforms there are that we need to understand these days.
Absolutely.
Good to have one facility manager with us, wherever you are. Thank you.
I think every week we're learning a new format to embrace.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think most people have been able to respond. I'm going to end the quiz. If you don't have a chance to respond to this, please fill it in the chat. That's also another great place for this. And we'll continue with the presentation. So I'm going to have John lead us in a ground-in exercise to help us kind of frame this workshop that we'll be sharing with everyone.
Okay, so this is something we call a ground-in exercise, and we are going to we're gonna sort you into breakout rooms for this. So you want to turn on your camera for this, and we're just going to give you 5 minutes. And Jenna, you're going to set a timer, and you're going to be placed into a room randomly. And let's see, we have 37 participants. How many groups, Jen? Groups of 4 to 5, maybe 7 groups. Anyway, we want you to think about this question. We want you to imagine a place that you feel most connected to. Think about the characteristics of that place, and then just share in your small groups and have a conversation, and we'll bring you back in about 5 minutes.
Hey, John, could I just add to that? When we do this as part of an actual workshop, when we phrase this question, we're asking our audience members to tell us what's a place they feel connected to relevant to the project. So it might be a specific site, it might be a district, it might be a larger community. And
Yeah.
we rely, of course, here from many different places around the country. So this is just a little variation on how we normally set up the grounding exercise that starts our regenerative workshop.
Thank you, Paul. So in this case, we want to connect it to a place. So think about this in your community,
Right. Mm-hmm.
where you live, a place where you live that you feel most connected to. Okay, Jen, should we
Okay,
take?
we're going to see how this works. These might be a little bit larger breakout groups than we had anticipated, but we'll give you a few minutes to discuss this.
We'll set a timer for 5 minutes.
Yep.
All right. So we're here
do we
now.
have the ability to drop in, or do we just stay here? Is that how that works?
How do we drop in?
So at the top of our screen, it says audience currently in breakout rooms, manage breakout.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see people. So some people, geez.
Oh, so we can join rooms.
We could join a room. This was really challenging. It didn't allow me to say like number of people in a room. It was how many rooms. And when I tried adding one, it was like there was only one person in that room. It didn't equally distribute them.
Jackie's in a room.
Yeah, I thought Jackie joined us.
Oh, look at her.
Folks.
So
Yeah, room 5 only has 2 people.
Yeah,
Should one of us join that room?
Oh, now it only has one person.
Oh, huh. What do you think? The others have what, 5? 6, 7. Oh,
7. Yeah, it wasn't. It automatically assigns, and as soon as you add a room, it doesn't reallocate them. So it was only as new people came that they would be added to that new room.
And did you set a timer?
Well, I tried.
Do you see it?
It's active, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem active because I set it for like 4 minutes and then said start breakout, and it didn't really work.
Hey, Nick, if you're on, could you help us with the timer issue? Get that going. We should be down to like 3 minutes left at this point.
2 minutes left, you think?
Yeah, let's leave them. Well, we have some bigger groups, so let's leave them. What do you guys think? Another 3 or 4? What do you like, Jen or John?
Well, I feel bad for the one room that only has one person in it.
Yeah, is there something we can do? Can we flip that, Valerie, to one of the other rooms?
Room number 5 only has one person.
And then are we going to ask them to share any insights they had or common themes?
I don't know that we're going to have time.
Okay.
I think we just note that normally in a workshop we would ask for that kind of information, but in the interest of time today, we'll just go ahead and move ahead. Does that make sense?
Maybe in the chat they could write any insights they had.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Any qualities of the shared experience. Okay, I'll do that and then transition over to you.
That sounds good. I don't know how to manage breakouts. So I don't know, you guys have the manage breakout rooms open?
I closed it, but I can open it again.
So you could end the breakout at any time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just
Yeah,
wouldn't.
we can just send them all a message saying, you know, they have 2 minutes left on there. For some reason, the timer is not working, so I'll look into that.
Jen, do we want to put a message?
How do we do that?
There's just a message up top.
Does it
You
say
go
2
to the
minutes left?
breakout room. Yeah, if you go into the breakout room management, you can type a message up top.
Yeah. John and Jen, do you want me to put 2 minutes left? Is that good?
1 minute.
Maybe 1 minute.
Okay.
And I'm doing it.
Okay, message sent.
Nick, are you able to see, are the people who are still showing up as kind of new participants, are they automatically being assigned right now to rooms, or?
I'm putting them in rooms
Okay.
because I had to move the one lady who was by herself in room 5. I had to move her out, so I had to take it off of auto assign. So I've been just kind of putting them in rooms as they pop in there.
Okay.
Thank you.
For the final breakout group at the end, would it be possible to create rooms to have like a cap, like so that they could have, 4 to 5 people in each room? Is that something that you'd be able to do for the final breakout?
Yeah, I'll just look at the number of participants, and we'll just probably have to add a room in there. But yeah, we can do that.
Would you mind doing that after this?
Yep, absolutely.
Please, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Has it?
It's probably been a minute.
Do you want me to end it, or do you want to end it?
Go ahead.
So welcome back. We hope you had a good discussion about the importance of place. We would normally, in a workshop situation at this time, we would do some sharing and try to understand some shared insights that we might have. So in this case, we don't have time for that, but we encourage you to, in the chat function, share any insights you may have had that maybe were common. So Jen, you want to take it?
Sure. Thank you for that, John. As you were considering a place that inspires you or you feel most connected to, it really leads us into this greater framework for regenerative thinking, which is about our connection and our place with nature, and how historically over time we have separated from being playing a vital role in recognizing the impact that we have on nature and the natural ecosystems around us to one in which we are defining progress more through our separation and dominance of nature. And today we are more or less at a crossroads with climate change, the global pandemic, social and cultural needs before us. And we recognize that we can either continue to kind of fight nature or kind of silo nature, or we can bring ourselves back into a greater connection and understanding of how nature can support life and how we can learn from that to inform our educational environments. So that's the lens from which we are going to speak today. You'll see our favorite architect, Buckminster Fuller, brought up here a couple times in the presentation, as he just has such great insight into the role of architecture and design within nature. And this quote we found truly fitting, that nature is a totally efficient, self-regenerating system. If we can discover the laws that govern this system and live synergistically within them, sustainability will follow and humankind will be a success. So that is, I thought, a really good framework for our conversations on how we rethink educational environments. And to frame regenerative design, we have to understand where sustainability has taken us. And this diagram shows in a very simple form the impacts that our actions and built environment have both socially and environmentally. And as we aspire to have less of an impact on our environment, we are working within a framework that's a sort of less bad. The 2030 challenge, for instance, has a goal of becoming carbon neutral or net zero energy. And that net zero sort of zero sum game is the goal of sustainable design. And we're using that as the springboard to ask ourselves, well, how can we design the built environment in such a way that it does good and has a positive social and environmental impact? And in much the way that a forest or a natural ecosystem doesn't do net zero, that nature is abundant and provides life. How might we design in a similar fashion? This graph, if it looks similar, is a nod to the International Living Futures graph that the Living Building Challenge has created.
Which you are accredited in, John. I think that's important for you to maybe say that.
Yep. I received my Living Futures accreditation earlier this year. The thing with springing from sustainability and shifting into a regenerative framework, especially as it relates to learning environments, is that it's a mindset change, that it really prioritizes a positive mindset over limiting beliefs, and recognizes that we have the technology and the resources available to us to truly create a regenerative future. It prioritizes community and a co-creative process, one that embraces diversity and inclusion over ego. It prioritizes health over wealth. It's about well-being. It prioritizes connection to place, connection to community, connection to nature over the exploitation of resources. And it prioritizes experience, personal and collective experience, over knowledge. And by that we mean, especially as we think about learning, having an immersive personal experience with place, as opposed to being taught from a textbook the facts that we are to learn from.
Jen, I would add on the connection one versus exploitation. There's a sense of emotional connection there as well, with a sense of love and feeling connected to both place and others, that is missing in that element of exploitation, right? There's sort of this emotionless quality to that. So I just wanted to add that.
Definitely. Thank you for adding that. It's that qualitative aspect that we can be inspired, and that we recognize the awe and wonder in place as well.
It's heart-based. Yeah.
Absolutely. So regenerative design as a concept has really been championed by the Living Building Challenge, which many of you are probably familiar with. And these are the petals that the Living Building Challenge posits as the sort of foundation of this more holistic, positive approach to design. And from a sustainability lens, we focus a lot on the natural resources, on energy and water. And you'll see that these account for but two of the petals. The greater kind of qualitative aspects of equity and beauty, connection to place, and health and happiness are extremely important within this larger context of regenerative design, as well as materials. The materials are unique in that we are looking at the whole life cycle of materials, and not only the embodied carbon and energy within them, but what are the health impacts of these materials on users and occupants? And how might we connect differently with materiality as part of that larger story of connecting to place and environment? And here's another Bucky quote for you all. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, we must build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And we are really looking to redefine what the educational environment is, one that inspires and connects. And as part of our workshops that we do with clients, we lead them through a provocation to really kind of set the stage for this thinking. And so I'm going to hand it over to Paul to lead you with this. This is a very timely article that we have before us now. Oh, Paul, I think you're muted.
Now that I'm off mute. Yeah, thank you, Jen. Appreciate that wonderful introduction and overview of our own evolution as a firm and as individuals, as we have sought to move from this thing that we've called sustainable design, and that term has been in common use now in the design community for a little more than 20 years. It really was about the mid-90s that came into common currency. And so we believe it is the right time to start to move to something else. I like the way, Jen, you summarized it. We're trying to move from doing less harm to asking, how does the built environment do good? And I really like that. So one of the things that we find as we work with our clients in these workshop formats is we've created a piece we call a provocation. And we're going to share with you a sample provocation today. Sorry for that top left hand side there. We have some format issues I see as we're moving between platforms. Looked great in PowerPoint. Looks a little bit here. So sorry for the hanging E and that hanging N there. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about why we do these provocations. It's not just the movement from sustainability to regenerative, but we find that so often our audience will come into these workshops with very strong preconceptions, like, oh, sustainability costs extra, or it brings maintenance problems. We just find there's a lot of baggage in this sector. And what we're trying to do with this provocation is to move beyond those preconceptions and to challenge a little bit the prevailing mindset that might be in place. And there's another strong reason we like to do these provocations, and that is that we find that when the workshop has a really strong student presence, there generally is much more receptivity to thinking about sustainability and now to regenerative design. And I really like that bottom left that you see there. Greta Thunberg, here's your excuses. Well, we find that the adults in our meetings tend to be the ones who have excuses. And when we have a strong student voice, we find we can be more successful in challenging that. So that's a setup for what you're going to see here. This is a little bit shorter, abbreviated version of a provocation that we might do with the client. So I'm just going to take you through it as if you were our client today. We're going to start with place and habitat. That's so important. Habitat loss is a problem everywhere and is driving a new mass extinction. And I'd like to know, we tend to think of habitat loss as something that happens in the Amazon or somewhere else. Habitat loss is happening right here in the US at an alarming rate, and it's something we need to pay a lot more attention to. We can preserve and protect more habitat, especially and even on our school sites. It's something we should be trying to do, we believe, on every site. We can preserve habitat elsewhere when we have to remove habitat on one of our school sites. We can think more broadly than just the rigid property lines that so often define our thinking. Pollinators are disappearing from our environments, a strong indicator that something is going wrong here. Yet pollinator pathways can help. How might we integrate them into a school's curriculum? School gardens are wonderful. We see them everywhere now. They can provide food for students to eat and important lessons in biology. We're going to talk about water now. Water is such a precious resource. We can celebrate its path from sky to earth instead of burying it, as we so often do, in underground piping or piping concealed within walls. Potable water is wasted irrigating school lawns. This is a photo from one of the driest school sites we've ever worked on in Reno. And yes, there are fields, play fields, that need to be watered or irrigated, and we can justify that. But what about all that other irrigated bluegrass lawn? That's potable water in an environment that has very little of it, simply going to waste. Yet it's easy to save water inside our school buildings. We know how to do this now. Rainwater can be harvested for toilets, for irrigation, for many things inside our buildings. Some schools are beginning to do this and to make it a visible lesson. Okay, let's talk about energy. You probably expected us to talk about energy at a sustainable or regenerative design workshop. Photovoltaic panels now cost 50 cents a watt. To me, who's been in this business a long time, that's unbelievable. When solar panels or photovoltaic panels first came on the market, they were $100 a watt. We have seen a 200-fold decrease in what solar energy costs. Solar panels now are so effective, they easily can power your entire school. Schools, in fact, can become fossil-free zones, and we strongly believe that they should be. This is something really interesting when you think about it. Every time you fill a school bus fill that tank full of diesel fuel, those gallons of diesel produce 10,000 and a little bit more pounds, or 5 tons of CO2 in the atmosphere. And just think about how many times a typical school district fills those school buses in a typical year. It's astounding. By the time our kindergartners graduate, not from high school, this used to say high school. I had to change it last night. I realized it's moving faster. By the time our kindergartners graduate from middle school, all their vehicles, new vehicles, will be electric. It's coming rapidly. Even their school buses will be electric in the not too distant future. This is always one that people really notice. We spend 86% of our time indoors. By the way, the EPA tracks this, so that's how we know about these numbers. And we spend, alarmingly, another 70% of our time inside vehicles. That doesn't leave much time to be outdoors, does it? In fact, that's only 7% of our time. And being inside so much can lead to something profound that is now called nature deficit disorder.
Interesting, Paul. When you read through the chat, every discussion was focused on outdoor spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't spend time there.
And I think most of our profound learning experiences, whenever we ask people to describe a profound learning experience, almost always the setting for that is outdoors. Rarely is indoors.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, thank you. So how can our schools reconnect children with nature, even when they're inside, but also providing more outdoor opportunities for learning? Everybody benefits from daylight and views, but especially children. Fortunately, we have left behind the era when schools were windowless buildings, and we have moved to a point where I think this is now something that we all strongly believe in. I'm going to talk about health. Today's kids will live 5 years fewer than their parents. This is something that's completely unprecedented in U.S. history, and we know this starting with the 1790, the first census that the United States took. So this is what the health data is starting to tell us. This is something that should really concern us. We should be paying a lot of attention to this and asking, how can schools make a difference? So how might our schools encourage both movement and play, a couple of things that are fundamental to better health? How might our schools become health education centers? All right, now this last thing about materials. Materials are so important. We're starting to think about them so differently. It's not okay to just have materials that we use once and then put them somewhere and forget about them all. Only 31% of plastic bottles right now are recycled, and only 55% of aluminum cans are recycled. And the sad reality is those numbers right now are going backwards. We're actually getting worse at recycling in the United States than we were before. And there are a lot of complex reasons behind that, but it is something that should greatly concern us. Our schools can, and many of them have, become training grounds for recycling and composting. We love that that's happening. Another thing about materials that we want to think about is many schools, as well as all of our buildings, are still containing chemicals that are harmful to both students and to the environment. In fact, there's this thing we call the red list, which is the chemicals that really have no place in our buildings, and yet they still are sneaking in. we know we can do better, and we can design buildings without including these materials. Schools can use wood, they can use local materials, they can use recycled materials. We want to be embracing all of those trends. And school buildings can be deconstructed when their useful life is over. There's no reason that when we take apart a leftover school building, all of it has to go to a landfill. We can find other creative uses for it, especially if we've designed it with that in mind from the beginning. And finally, resiliency. How will our schools be healthy places in times of pandemic? We're also keenly aware of what COVID-19 has done to education these days. But I think we need to be looking forward to the fact that we're probably in an era when other pandemics may be coming at us. COVID-19 may be the beginning of a trend. So we need to be thinking about our schools as places that can still provide quality education, even when these pandemics occur. How can our schools remain comfortable despite higher temperatures? I don't know if any of you have seen this in the news, but we're to the point now where it's pretty safe to conclude that 2020 will be the hottest year in recorded history. Yet another in a long string of them. This is a trend that's absolutely here to stay. We need to be thinking about how do we keep our buildings and sites comfortable despite this trend? And how can our schools be healthy places when the outside air quality is really poor, as we've seen across the Western US in the last many months? And when there is an emergency, when we have times of need, how can our schools serve the whole community as resources? So there you have it. That is the provocation. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Jen. So I think I'm going to stop. There we go. So now you've heard a typical provocation. Again, that was a slightly abbreviated one, and it also didn't have anything specific to a community. Often we'll try to tweak and adjust it so it reflects particular concerns or resource issues that may crop up in a specific location.
Well, thank you, Paul. Another part of our sustainability or regenerative design workshop is to get to know our clients, their values, their perceptions better before we even have the workshop. And part of that is to provide a survey to them prior to the workshop. And I'm going to hopefully start another poll. If you see this poll, this is a modified version of the surveys that we give to our clients to help them consider various aspects of their school that maybe they don't always think about. The biggest questions that we ask are how do different elements of the built environment and the landscape impact human health and well-being, impact our students' performance and excitement and engagement with learning, impact their attendance. And it's always fascinating to hear how people perceive these impacts. Some of the other questions that we ask are, what do you most align with, or what is your organization's greatest value as it relates to, in this case, regenerative design? As Paul illustrated each of those petals, which of those do you connect most to?
Yeah.
And then finally, we ask a question to understand what are barriers, perceived or real, to achieving your goals for regenerative design and to achieving the visions. So we'll just give a couple minutes. You all are really engaged with this, and it's great to see.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah. And hopefully everyone's able to scroll through and see the live updates for each of these questions as well.
And each time we get this poll from different communities, it's interesting to us how they vary, or values are different from community to community, and it's a way for us to connect and understand them as we begin a process.
Yeah, it really becomes the springboard for which we have these conversations within the community. And as Paul mentioned, you know, one of the most important voices within these workshops are the students. And so we encourage our partners and clients to share this survey with students as well, and to have these conversations within their classrooms as they engage.
Then there are a couple of questions in chat about the poll. One was, is it fill in the blank or multiple choice? Oh, not that. Yeah, that's.
So
yeah, that's,
somebody said we're not seeing the live updates.
Oh, can you share your screen? Or are you sharing a screen?
Jen, are you sharing this?
No, I'm not sharing a screen.
Yeah, it might be. We're seeing it as presenters. I'm not sure our audience.
Oh, darn.
And Nick, you're on the call. Nick's our tech expert. Nick, how do we share the results with everybody?
No. Maybe we could just summarize.
Let's see, done. Well, here, let me see. What if I end quiz? If it will show the results.
Okay.
Thank you all for bearing with us as we are. There we go. Do you see the results?
Yes. Okay. Great.
Yep.
Right. Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So the first question about what are the three primary impacts that building and site design have on our occupants, and 73% say that building and site impact learning. That's exactly what we are discovering through this, and why we see such a great connection between next century learning design and the needs of both our planet and our communities, as well as our students' just thirst for learning.
Probably not a surprise with a group of architects who are passionate about that relationship.
I think we are in a virtual room of like-minded people. I would agree. But it is great to also see the correlation between physical health, mental health, and emotional health. I think these are ones that a lot of our clients don't necessarily make that connection to. Sometimes there's a strong connection between mental health and daylight and views to nature, but the sort of kind of missing components of physical health and emotional within the context of both interior and outdoor spaces is great. The second question, which of the following regenerative design approaches do you feel most aligned with? We only allowed you to pick 3, so this is great. Almost 2/3 of you chose health and happiness.
Jen, can you scroll down to that? I'm only seeing.
Are you not able to see that?
Are you scrolling to 2?
I did scroll. Are you still on seeing question number 1? Oh, somebody said they only see their answers.
You might need to just keep summarizing.
Well, I'll keep summarizing.
But scroll as you go.
Now you're
somehow. Oh no. I just want to see results. Oh no.
We thought for a split second, so it was there.
The results are gone.
The results left. Oh no, technology.
Well, we can switch gears.
Okay, well, let's just go back. Thank you for participating. We did see barriers, a lot of initial cost. as that barrier. So we apologize for being lost. We will jump back to the presentation. And I also want to say the presentation that I'm sharing as we kind of, oh no. You guys see a blinking screen?
Yes, your survey blinking. Now it's
Hold on. Let's refresh. All right, let's try again. Please tell me if you see my screen blinking. Hopefully it's stable now. Okay.
It is stable.
Great. This program that we are using for this presentation is a collaborative online program called Miro that we also use as another co-creative process, especially in these virtual settings that we've found to be pretty successful. So we wanted to just kind of share that platform with you. The sustainability workshop, as Paul mentioned earlier, we had a previous version of it that we rethought and recreated within the lens of regenerative design. And this is the story of that workshop. So it included that provocation, the survey, and now I wanted to bring it into the places in which we've used this. And to also preface it by saying that was kind of version 1 of Regenerative Design Workshop. And we are going to embark on version 2 with you all today as well. So this starts in the Iron Range of northern Minnesota. For anyone who's familiar with this, it's kind of the Midwest mountain range that we have, beautiful hills and woodlands, lakes, and this community that we were serving was comprised of 3 towns: Virginia, Eveleth, and Gilbert, Minnesota. They were 2 districts, 2 school districts. Eveleth Gilbert was one, and Virginia another, and they were rival districts in everything they did. But they recognized that they individually could not serve the educational needs of their students, and so made the impressive decision to consolidate into one school district to meet the needs of their students. And the projects that came out of this as a result were 2 elementary schools and a secondary school. And what we want to share with you here in this aerial is the place that we were immersed in. The woodlands, the sort of north woods, lush forests, juxtaposed against the gashes and scars in the landscape that are created by the taconite mines. A significant amount of our steel in the steel industry comes from this area as they mine the taconite from the earth. So all of these brown scars are mines.
Can you make it a little bit bigger for folks, or scroll in on it?
Sure. Yeah. We are also within the continental shelf of the Laurentian Divide, where the land north of the Laurentian Divide drains into the Hudson Bay and south to the Gulf of Mexico. So this is a very rich area that we are in, and is a story of connection to place and resources. And John, feel free to.
Sure. The communities there created this amazing partnership, and they have now merged and consolidated. They're now one school district. They call themselves Rock Ridge, and the communities have been experiencing population leaving, and they see this as a reinvestment in their communities to not only attract new people to the communities, but to keep students there. So they are actually in the process of literally regenerating their communities, and they see this collective project they're undertaking as the focal point of this regeneration, transforming education to be more compelling. So it really is a regenerative effort on a grander scale, not just architecture, but as community building.
Yeah, thinking beyond the property lines into the larger community. This is another Google image of those communities, and one of the things that we really embraced was this question of what happens when the natural resources have been extracted and used up, and the industry moves on. And these communities are great examples of regeneration as it relates to kind of a rewilding and recreational reclamation of these pits. So you can see just on the outskirts of the town of Virginia an abandoned pit, the Rochelow pit, that now is a recreational lake and has been reforested. There's also my favorite. Minnesota is a land of 10,000 lakes, and this by far has to be my favorite name of a lake. Lake Orbigone by Gilbert. Absolutely phenomenal. Another example of a pit that has been reclaimed. And given back to be both a natural asset to the community as well as regenerating the landscape. This is an image of that Rochelow pit right outside of Virginia. Part of the workshop that we did with this community was to ask them about what they love about their place, their community, and to share with them their survey results, this being just one of them, that helped kind of frame our understanding and needs of the community. We asked them similar questions to this group. What are your priorities? And you can see the indoor air quality ranked highest amongst them, followed by daylight and views and energy. Within the construct of this workshop, which we gave in July of 2019, we divided regenerative design into 3 categories of resource stewardship, occupant well-being, and community and curriculum in order to frame the lens that we worked within. We provided a matrix for each of those categories for participants to understand, following the sort of provocation that Paul just gave of both data, facts, and possibility for each of these categories, and gave each individual person a dot, a sticker, to place where along the spectrum they would like these new schools to perform. Standard, if we think about that original graph of the less good or less bad and does good, this sort of standard compliance of sort of business as usual, where does that fall within each of these categories? And then having a sustainable lens. What's that sort of net zero approach for each of these categories? And then what does regenerative look like? What would a positive approach look like for each of these categories? And as I mentioned, each individual person was given a dot to place where they would like the schools to fall. And then within their table groups, which is what we were kind of hoping to be able to do with you all today, but within their tables discussed why they had these opinions of where they would like to be. And collectively as a table, they were given a larger matrix for each of these, given 1 dot per category to come together as a table to identify their values. And then we had an even larger matrix that we shared with the entire group, one representative from each table brought up their collective values. And that's what is represented by each of these dots along this spectrum. So you can see where each table kind of landed, and collectively as an even larger group where their values are. And then the final exercise was we gave each individual one single little blue dot and said, we know we can't do all of these. We can't be regenerative in all that we do. That's a very ambitious thing. But if we could only do one, we could only focus on one truly regenerative quality, what would it be? And on the left of each of these matrices, you see where they landed. And that was in energy and in building as a teaching tool. And so that helped us frame our suggestions for moving forward and inform the design. So we provided...
If you could go back for just 1 second, Jen. If you look at the deployment of these dots, it's really interesting. We were surprised at how far up the scale they were interested in moving. It was a little unusual for us to see this, and there are no dots in compliant whatsoever. So a pretty forward-thinking group. It was just interesting to see the results, and it helped us shape the design as we moved forward.
And I think to that point, John, I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that by setting the tone and the mindset that we did within the provocation and the grounding exercises, that it helped them open their minds to greater possibility of what the educational environment could be. And that was the hope for the workshop. I'm not going to go into these, but following the workshop, we provided suggested strategies for each of those categories, and the dots represent the sort of primary goals and ambitions from that workshop. So how did it become manifest into physical space? Paul mentioned earlier, how can play help generate health and well-being? And that was a critical component for the superintendents of the elementary school to say, play is where it's at, especially in a community in a super cold climate where it's winter half the year. They wanted to make sure that children were able to connect and have free play indoors and outdoors year-round. And in a less scripted way. So this is the heart space of the elementary school. And within the context of place, our landscape team really dove into the natural resources that are abundant in these sites. And you can see the footprints in black of the secondary school and the elementary school, as this was kind of designed as a campus. And layering within them the richness of the topography, the numerous wetlands that existed within this region, as well as rock outcroppings, fault lines, glacial erratics that really serve as the impetus for expanding learning to the outdoors and connecting students to place in both a scientific approach, but also that sort of emotional and experiential quality that John had alluded to. So what does that look like? In this case, it looked at all of the various ecosystems that this site had. This is a section through the site. What happens at the edge of ecosystems where they meet? And what is the richness within this that we can really help students to learn and engage with? And providing a series of outdoor spaces and trails for that connection was at the heart of the site design.
So the high school facility this is a 7-12 facility, and it's organized into academies. Has a real sort of a career, both college and career focus, but lots of hands-on learning. And we really had to get to know the site and spent a lot of time on the site because in order to save as many trees as possible and keep the habitat that was in place, as Paul talked about earlier, the building was sited very intentionally to minimize impacts to the precious environment. And over half of the acreage, we were able to place the building in a location without, I think we disturbed less than 1 acre of wetlands with a total of 60 acres that were left untouched. So it was really an extraordinary team effort by civil engineers, landscape architects, and lots of good, healthy discussions with the client about being able to live with less playfields, for example, or fewer baseball and softball fields, and they let go of having tennis courts, for example, and decided to use other community assets. So it was really an extraordinary effort.
And these are just some renderings of how the school nestles within that landscape and responds to the existing landscape.
Yeah, it creates an outdoor place that will be not a lawn, but kind of a restored ecosystem of the region.
And serves as a living lab for students as well.
Yeah.
And then as we move to the interior, that energy of connection, collaboration, and innovation extends into these dynamic open spaces and just hands-on learning at the forefront.
Visual connections, daylighting, views, all of the things that were important to them, so that when you're on the inside of this building, you will always feel connected to the outside wherever you are. You'll have this visual connection to place and love of place.
And the second project that we used this workshop on was in Colorado, in Sierra Grande schools in Blanca, Colorado. So I'll have Paul take it away.
Thanks, Jen. A quick time check. How are we doing?
We're a little behind time. We should probably go quickly through this.
So from one continental divide to another, of course, we have the real continental divide, and that one up north is just kind of, well, whatever. But okay, I guess it still counts. So anyway, this is Blanca, Colorado, in the San Luis Valley, and just as Jen described at Evelyn Gilbert, Virginia, the site was such a powerful, almost overwhelming influence on the design. So it was the case here at Blanca, Colorado. This is an incredible site. I've been working on projects in this area for about a dozen years now. And I never mind the 3.5 to 4 hour trip. It's such a spectacular setting that no matter how many times I have to go there, I absolutely look forward to it. And there's such an incredible history to this site. You're looking literally at Mount Blanca, which is at the southern end of the Sangre de Cristo Range. To the Navajo, it's the sacred peak of the East. It defines the eastern boundary of their ancestral lands. It's also, by the way, the headwaters of the Rio Grande River, and this area is primarily agricultural in character. It's also home, surprisingly to many, to a lot of industrial-scale solar generating facilities. So it has a very unusual mix. But the overwhelming issue right now is that economically, this area has been depressed for most of a generation. And so this is a community that's looking to reinvent itself to stay relevant, to give students a reason to stay in their communities. And it seemed to us, just coming a few months after the project you just heard about in Minnesota, this was another great chance to test and apply the regenerative design theme. And that's what we did. So can I run the slides? Okay, go ahead. Thanks, Jen. So even when we were formulating our response to the request for proposal here, we already started to create a path and share that with the client. And this is a project funded by a program called BEST here in Colorado. Basically, it funds it serves districts that can't on their own raise the bonds that they need for facility renovation or construction. And so this is a very remote area. It's a 4-hour drive from Denver. It's a 2-hour drive from any other significant town or city. And so maintenance became a really important issue here. So one of the things that we've seen with sustainable design is sometimes we have tended to create solutions in order to save energy or water, whatever, that got fairly complex technically. And we are thinking that as we move to regenerative design, we want to leave that overly technical solution mindset behind and move towards simpler solutions that are more readily and easily maintained by a client such as this. And so we moved to this passive house concept. I'm sure many of you are familiar with passive house, but we wanted to ask ourselves a critical question. Could we design a passive house K-12 school without increasing the cost, living absolutely within the budget that was given to us through the state funding mechanism? So next slide, Jen. And so we posed that question during our early workshops, explained to the district and the owner's rep and the contractor what that might look like and what it might mean. And we were able to generate a lot of support, including, importantly, from the students. So just a quick overview for those of you not familiar is that when we do a passive house project, we invest more of the dollars, more of the budget into an improved envelope. And that lets us put in place much simpler mechanical systems. And just since we have so many architects on the call today, I'll just share with you specifics. The average R value for the walls of this building is R50. The average roof R value is R65. We have R6.5 sub-slab insulation for the entire footprint of the building. All the glazing in this building is triple pane. So even for us who've done a lot of very highly energy efficient buildings, this was a significant step forward. And the question became, okay, how do you do all of that? How do you deliver an envelope like that and not increase the construction cost? And so this is a case for integrated design, and having that workshop from the very beginning set this in motion for us to get there. So in fact, next slide, Jen.
And so, Paul, how did we do that? There's a greatly reduced mechanical system.
Absolutely. So so normally, and let me back up. So I'm so glad you asked that question, John. Normally we look at something like this and say, well, the way to do that is to right size the mechanical and other systems. And our experience is that right sizing rarely works, especially in today's construction economy. We can't just take a system and make it a little bit smaller and expect to recoup savings out of it that are enough to pay for these significant improvements in the envelope. What we have to do is eliminate entire portions of something like a mechanical system. So this building is in a location that's every bit as cold as the climate that we just saw in northern Minnesota because it's high altitude. And what we're able to do here, we completely eliminated the perimeter heating from this building. That's unusual in a school, but the insulation is so incredible, you no longer need that perimeter heating. We even eliminated the entire boiler. There is no boiler for this system. In fact, this building is so simple mechanically, it's 100% electric, and we don't have a substantial cost penalty by taking it 100% electric. In fact, to complete the regenerative story, we're actually planning to install an active ground-mounted solar PV array. So this building will be at completion 100% zero energy and self-sustaining. So we're really excited about this story, really excited to bring to the state of Colorado a story like this of a building that's easier to maintain, and yet achieves some incredible efficiencies. I think I have one more slide here. Jen, if you could advance it. Yeah, so one of the things too that has worried us with sustainable design in the past is, in addition to designing complex systems, we've also tended to invest a lot more heavily into materials that bring with them high levels of embodied carbon. And what we're starting to understand as a profession is that embodied carbon is every bit as important an issue. Some would say even more important than operational carbon. So this is just a chart that shows the rigorous analysis we went to look at where was the embodied carbon going into these different wall assemblies, and to try to find wall assembly that had a combination of these incredibly high R values, but without driving the embodied carbon necessarily high. And we were able to work with the product and manufacturer to find the products. Those are the ones that you see circled are the 3 different wall assemblies that were used in this particular project. So I think that's the last slide we have on this. So we feel really excited about this project that's in construction right now. Our second school building design using these regenerative principles and based on the workshop process that began it all. So thanks very much. Back over to John. John or Jen? I forgot who's next.
So I think John, you'll be next. That was version 1 of the regenerative design workshop, and we identified collectively that it's not enough to leave it like that. It has to continue to evolve to become more regeneratively focused. And so, as a group, we've discussed what are the synergies that we can discover, and this is what we're going to share with you now, what John is going to bring up. What are the synergies with next century learning design that can be truly supported by regenerative design that we've just shared?
So we're going to go quickly through this. We have 20 minutes left. I'm going to take 5 minutes, and then we'll go to the breakouts. Does that sound good, Jen? So here we're looking at some, what we would term, these are next century learning design principles or values that seem, and there's a great deal of overlap that we see with regenerative. We've got the categories here that we think are valued in next century: the idea of beauty, the idea of risk-taking, personalized education, well-being, community-driven, connected to place in that context, collaboration across the system, shared ownership of space and programs, and equity. I think all of those you would agree are sort of principles of next century learning. So if you can go to the next one. So this is kind of a crazy Venn diagram, if you will, with some additive bits. And we have spent, the 3 of us have been spending a couple of weeks trying to build this. And so obviously next century learning is on one side, regenerative is on the other. And at top and bottom are these 2 ideas that learning is natural, right? It comes naturally when we're awake, and that nature as teacher are sort of bookends to this. Also bookended with beauty and equity as the 2 aspirational moments. And then if you can scroll in, and we'll just scroll down slowly, and we're making these connections through through the middle. So what lies between place-based education, schools that provide immersive experiences with their learners, teachers and learners, building as the architectural built environment as the 3rd teacher or as a teaching tool, co-creative energy, which is how all these threads can be woven together. This idea that Paul talked about, resilient learning landscapes, apply to both. This idea of what is an ecosystem of innovation, right? This sort of permanent beta that I think we're all experiencing right now. The importance of wonder and awe to inspire and spark are common in each. Mindful learning and well-being, wellness, mindfulness, healthy habitats are important for both. And then this, just wrapping up, this idea of biodiverse communities is an important element. So those are the threads we see, the buckets that are sort of bridging the regenerative and next century learning. And we have, one of the reasons we created a more engaging regenerative design workshop is, we've been doing workshops for school design, and we felt we needed to bring the regenerative design discussion into an equal level with school design itself. So I'm going to end it there. That's a lot of words and bubbles and connections, but I'm not sure what the next slide is, Jen.
Now we are going to go into our breakout rooms. We don't have as much time as we had initially hoped. This session is 15 minutes. So we can maybe
make it 10
minutes in a breakout room, and then we'll come back for kind of a share back. Let's see, hopefully these breakout rooms work well. I'm going to see if I can create a time limit. We'll find out.
Can you make this like 9 breakouts?
Yep. So we have smaller groups this time around.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself in a room by yourself, please use the chat to let us know. Here we go. Okay, it looks like the timer is working now. Nick created additional breakout rooms, so.
Did they get instructions to do something?
Shoot.
Bring them back. And we'll just give them 5 minutes this time.
Welcome back. Paul, we can't hear you. Paul had something to say.
No, I was just laughing.
To keep us on task.
I was wondering exactly that too. It's like, well, I don't remember hearing what we told him to do.
You may be wondering what you were supposed to do in your breakout room.
We're sorry.
There was one additional slide for your prompt. It might not come as a surprise to you what this last question is, but as you consider where you work and the unmet needs of your community, how might the concepts of regenerative design that we just discussed today inform your next project? So as you go into the breakout rooms for the second time, discuss these concepts amongst yourself, and then we will share back in a few minutes. I think we'll give, how many minutes?
5.
5 minutes? Okay. Thank you.
Good. I see he's got 8 breakout rooms. That'll be good.
Okay. Do we want to look at the questions?
Yeah, I've been trying to send some answers out there. We've had some good questions.
Oh, have you? Look at you.
Jen, one for you. What was the certificate you got again?
Okay.
Is there a way to do QA follow-up later on?
That's a good question.
Yes, we will stay on.
I can stay on for like 5-10 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can too. Also, At the end, I just did a thank you slide and I put our email addresses on it. Are you okay with sharing that? If people
Yep.
want to.
So let me ask you guys, how much of this content are we willing or wanting to share? All of it? Some of it? Are there parts we don't want to share yet? What do we think?
We should probably discuss it.
Yeah, I think part of the gig is you share your content.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it was a PowerPoint, that would be available for
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
It's all part of sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how do we want to maybe share a link to the mural board?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. How
I
you
think we can create PDFs from the individual frames
Oh, okay.
of the mural board. Unless you saw value in creating a more collaborative environment for people to share.
I'm going to say we will all stay on for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sounds
Mhm.
good.
Do you want to type in your certification?
Is that something that I can
No, just go to the queue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can reply specifically to that one. There we go.
Yeah.
We got up to 50 participants.
Oh, that's a lot.
And I'm going to say, yes, we will make a link available to a PDF version of the mural board. Is that what we want to do?
Do we want to include the provocation as part of it?
I don't know. Probably not.
Probably not that.
I don't think we need to do that. How are we feeling? Jen, you're doing great.
You all are doing wonderful.
Fun to talk it through like that.
It's nice how it was just really fluid and conversational too.
Mm-hmm.
How much time we got left? 11:52.
7 seconds.
I think we're probably at least 4 minutes into the 5. I don't know if let me see if there was a timer set. Oh, it is. Okay, 45 seconds left. So
I responded to Kimberly's question. Were there other questions?
There's the room chat and then there's a Q&A, so that's you kind of have to check both.
Paul, one of the questions in the Q&A was, what are the reasons for kids living 5 years fewer than their parents?
Well, let me look at that. Mm-hmm.
Up towards the top.
Okay.
As well as kind of what are the accreditations to pursue.
Is that one in the room chat or that one's in the Q&A?
That's in the Q&A. Yeah, I'm only looking at Q&A right now.
I want to make sure I put the answer
I
back.
think everyone's back.
Hello. Everybody back? We hope you are and enjoyed your breakout conversation.
So again, and maybe any insights you had, if you could share those in the chat. I don't know if people can speak in this format, or
I think we have a way to enable that.
Yes, they can. I think by clicking the unmute microphone.
People might be able to share.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure that you select live next to your name as well if you want to share out loud.
Oh, thank you, Nick.
Okay, just 5 minutes remaining. And Jen, how are we going to use our 5-minute period of time? Thank you for the chats.
Well, AJ mentioned in the chat that they talked about curriculum alignment for outdoor learning, and also how outdoor spaces can serve as regenerative spaces for the community. And I think that's a great analysis of kind of that synergy of how can we think beyond the sort of walls of the school and into the greater community, as well as connection to learning through nature. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Jen, I'd jump on. The issue of outdoor classrooms has been around a long time. Many of us on this call have been working with outdoor classrooms, but we're seeing an absolute explosion of interest right now in outdoor learning. Partly driven by COVID, but I don't think only that. I think the outdoor learning environment is a strong interest right now, and I don't think we're going to see that back away even once this pandemic is over.
Agreed. It's really actually an opportunity for us. We think about resiliency and how we can continue to have our children together in learning environments, and outdoor learning is proving to be a very great option within climates that can support it.
And there was a comment by Pat that Windows is so important in balancing security and learning for our inner city schools. Yeah, there's this real interesting dynamic with transparency and security that I think our clients often have questions about.
Oh, there's a question Meredith asked. What advice do you have for schools who don't have amazing natural landscapes to create the trees and plantings other states might have? We have to plant, and that's expensive in terms of maintenance and first cost.
Well, my first response to that, we had a question earlier about, well, what do you do in denser urban environments too, where there's not much nature to connect to? And I think a great place to start would be to spend some time understanding biophilic design principles. Those, if you look at, for example, the Terrapin Green website, they articulate 14 principles of biophilic design. All of those could be applied in an educational setting. So I think we can manipulate, we can design the built environment in school buildings to provide some of those experiences that you can get in nature. It's not completely a substitute, I don't think, but I do think that design is part of the solution there. And hopefully you can find ways to take students in those urban environments out to natural settings. And I think it also goes to the issue of city design. In the equity conversation right now, a big part of it is, do we have equitable amounts of green space across all our cities? Do citizens, for example, are they within a 5 or 10 minute walk to a green space? And so I think we're going to see a real transformation in our thinking about cities, particularly in regard to providing nature. So just a few thoughts.
There's a lot of really good work being done about greening urban sites and proven benefits of just minimal landscaping, trees, green space.
Yeah, right, John. It doesn't have to be huge. Yeah, one tree can in fact make a difference.
Yeah.
And also it provides the opportunity for us to question how we approach our sites given those constraints. So for instance, do we need to provide as much parking, off-street parking for our staff? Are there opportunities to reduce parking to provide more green space? Do we need as many play fields, for instance, as John had mentioned in Evelyn Gilbert, Virginia? Asking those greater questions, if the value is clearly stated for the connection to outdoor spaces and nature.
And let's not forget about our rooftops.
Absolutely.
As places to create micro ecosystems.
Yeah, especially in those urban settings. Yeah,
If any of you saw Jeannie Gang's presentation at the Innovation Conference, it was a great story.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are at time.
Oh, we are.
We are at time. If anyone wants to stay on for a couple minutes, we can answer some additional questions if needed.
Right.
But thank you all for joining us. We hope this was kind of enlightening and exciting for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
So we'll look at the Q&A and see if there's anything new coming up, or the chat. Oh, I see Cleveland Reese. Hey, Cleve.
Nick, are we able to stop recording? I can control that.